What's up, duelists? Big news, big news. There was a 95-player PS5 Edison format tournament in Pennsylvania at a store called Unmatched Gaming. Now, I got mixed feelings about this because the owner of that store is a toxic little asshole online. But I've heard he's a really nice guy in person. So, hey, we got beef. Let's squash it, brother, because I got to put respect. You throw a 95-person tournament, that's fucking awesome. Anyway, I got the top 8 deck lists for you guys. We're going to go over them. Shout out to Unmatched Gaming on Facebook. You can also find the lists over there. Check them out. Check out their page. And if you're in the area, check out the store. I got to put respect on the people who are putting on for the format. In any case, let's hop right into the lists. Now, there's a couple of things in some of these lists that I think might be card availability things. And there was one other thing I actually really wanted to check before I got started. I wanted to make sure I had the lists accurate. I think there's something wrong with the first place list, but I'll fix it when I get there. Okay. Yeah, where was I going with this? I was going somewhere with this. Oh yeah, top 8 list. I think there's a few card availability things where like some cards are missing in some of these lists that I don't think should be. This list from Taylor Crumlick, for example, it's a very like standard like Swedish style Blackwing deck with the triple Greffer, triple value. I think this list is very powerful. I think the main deck's awesome. He talked a little bit about how Power Filter was for quick draw and frogs, and it worked out pretty well for him in the tournaments. I think one card he's missing is Silverwind in the extra deck. This card comes up a lot. I actually make it like almost every other game when I play Blackwings, so I'm surprised he doesn't have it at all. You could probably slot it in over maybe an Armed Wing or the Android. Those cards don't come up that much. The third Armed Wing or the Android, they definitely don't come up as much as the Silverwind, but very powerful duelist. Shout out to Taylor Crumlick for doing a good job. All right, next deck. Steven Silverman, apparently also a very powerful player. Now, I know of a Steven Silverman who played a different game. It was like Duel Masters or Kaijudo or something. I don't know if it's the same Steven Silverman, but if he is, he's powerful in multiple games. He top 8'd this PS5 tournament with Christiasworn, which is a deck that's like picking up in popularity ever since Mumix had that insane run at the Worlds event. Now, he's got some big changes from Mumix's list. He sacrificed a lot of the consistency, elected to add in like Wolf, a few other like cards like Gareth that don't really start for the deck, cutting into the Lila count, cutting into like some of the Fairy count as well, and just opting to main deck like Heavy Storm, Foolish Wolf, some of the more like maybe generically good cards, but not so engine-focused cards. The side deck is really interesting. He's like siding Morphing Jar. I don't know if Morphing Jar is great in this deck. On one hand, it's really interesting because like you can reload your hand after you Herald, which is pretty sick. But at the same time, you're playing 28 monsters. And I don't really like playing Morphing Jar in a deck with 28 monsters. Like you're more often than not going to get as much value as your opponent if you're playing a deck with Morphing Jar. But it can be okay, especially if you got the Decree. Like your opponent sets their whole hand and then you Decree them and then you flip Jar and then you're big chillin'. You can just JD nuke and neutralize that way. So that's really interesting. It's a really interesting sideboard inclusion. He's also got some cool ones like Soul Exchange. It's pretty good in the Lightsworn Mirror. You Soul Exchange their monster, you sack it for Celestia, pop 2 more cards. It's pretty fucking good. The extra deck is where I think some of the things are lacking again. This might just be card availability. I don't know how many people really own an Avenging Knight Parshath, but you definitely need it for a deck like this. Definitely need it for Soul of Purity and Light and Plague, or Soul of Purity and Light and Herald of Orange Light. And then also I think you do need the Wyvern, the Ancient Sacred Wyvern. He comes up a little bit, especially if you're boarding in Cyber Dragons. He comes in quite a bit. You can get some pretty crazy OTKs with this card, so I definitely think you should have it in the extra deck. It's definitely going to come up more than like the second Stardust or like maybe even Flamvel or Ukizis or Mistworm or something. So I don't know. Just definitely some cards to consider. I think having those two buffs up the extra deck. I know some people have talked about playing Light End Dragon as well as an extra deck option for this deck because Light End Dragon can attack over Judgment Dragon. It's an 8-star that gets over JD, which is pretty good actually. In the mirror match or against Lightsworns. All right, next top 8 list, we got River Rothermel. Really cool looking frog deck. Something about this frog list makes me feel like River is a modern Yu-Gi-Oh player. Mostly it's because he just has a bunch of 3-ofs that don't really make sense. Like Triple Mally Edge, you don't really need a third. You don't really need the third Dupe Frog. You could probably cut one of those. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I feel like this deck could benefit a lot from having like an Allure of Darkness. It could benefit a lot from having maybe some trap cards, Phoenix Wing, Treacherous Trap Hole, that kind of thing. So those cards could go a long way in the slots where these 3-ofs that are maxed out don't necessarily need to be maxed out. Really sweet deck list. Another thing in the extra deck that I think might be a card availability thing, but it might also be a space concern, is he's only playing 2 Absolute Zero. I feel like you should definitely be playing 3 in a deck with triple Miracle Fusion. This deck is looking to summon Absolute Zero, and you almost, not almost, but I feel like you have a lot more games where you're summoning the 3rd Absolute Zero than you're summoning like Flamvel or Urukizis or Ancient Fairy Dragon. I feel like these cards come up way less often than the 3rd Absolute Zero will, especially in the longer, grindier matchups where you're seeing your 3rd Miracle Fusion a little bit more consistently. The sideboard is pretty cool. It's like no bullshit. He's not playing any trap cards in the entire 55, which is kind of sick. That's another reason why I think he's maybe a modern player. He's got triple Twister, triple Soul X, triple Vanities, triple Crow. Just no bullshit, right? Tourney, double Cyber Dragon for the other stuff you have to deal with, other back row and machines. So pretty solid stuff. Congrats to River for making top 8. Next top 8 list is from Andrew Vong, another Blackwing list. One really interesting thing about this Blackwing list is there's no Vayu, which, again, I don't know if that's a card availability thing or like if he just doesn't like Vayu. I think Vayu's good. I think it's worth playing. Yeah, it's a little underpowered when you draw it, but it's so good to have in deck for Shura. Like, Shura is not that good of a card if you don't have Vayu in your deck. And then also, your deck is pretty normal summon reliant if you don't have Vayu. Like, I don't think you can do too much in the way of, like, special summoning if your normal summon gets stopped if you don't have Vayu in your deck. So, yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? 0 Vayu? Is that accurate? Also, he's got the compulsory, the double Dust Tornado. Big fan of these cards in Blackwings. I think 1 Dust Tornado is probably fine, but 2's cool too, especially if you expect a lot of the mirror. It's pretty good in the mirror. He's not playing Oppression anywhere, so he must have expected a lot of the mirror, which makes sense. It makes sense because he's got the compulsory and the Dusts in the main. Dark Eruption, again, a card I'm like kind of on the fence about, but he thinks it's better than Vayu, so shit. Sideboard has 2 Fissure, probably a card availability thing. You would probably just play Smashing Ground or something else in its place. I don't really see why you would ever play Fissure over something like Smashing Ground. But yeah, I don't know. Giant Truenade's interesting. Mind Control is very powerful. Chain Disappearance is not a card I've ever really been a fan of, but since people have been waning on Enemy Controller, it's gotten a lot better. My issue is if your opponent special summons a Treeborn, or they do the Substitute loop, they have 2 Treeborns. You Chain Disappearance one of them, they just bring out the second one. It only gets from your opponent's hand and deck. It doesn't get from their graveyard. So oftentimes this is just a bad DD Crow that you have to set. Oftentimes. Sometimes it's okay, like hitting Dandelion's kind of heat. And that can come up a little bit. Not sure if there's anything else. I guess it can hit Consecrated Light, if that's like normal summoned. That's really it though. I don't know. It's got some applications outside of hitting Treeborn, but I think it's pretty bad at hitting Treeborn because oftentimes they'll just substitute and the other one will be in the grave. So they'll just like bring out the first one, you chain dis it, they bring out the second one. It's just like get fucked. Double Skill Drain, interesting. Pulling the Rug, interesting. I do like Pulling the Rug more than I like these like sort of floodgate cards, but yeah, good shit. Congrats to Andrew for his top 8. Now we're getting into top 4. We got 3rd place. There's 4 people at 5th place, and then there's 2 people at 3rd place. This is a really, really cool list. Gladiator Beasts from Sean McCabe. He's got double Rediari in the main. No Heavy Storm in the main. No Typhoon in the main. This is something I expect us to see a lot of moving forward, especially in decks that play heavy back row like Glads, where you're not really looking to activate Heavy Storm, and you're looking for more of that sweeper style effect of Trap Stun and less of the spot removal style effect of Mystical Space Typhoon. He's playing the full 3 Trap Stun and Cold Wave, so he's looking to just shut off all the back row at once so he can go for his big Test Tiger Prisma play or Test Tiger into Secutor play. One cool thing about this list is he's playing double Wabaku. This is not only chainable against OTK decks when they try to go for a big push, but it's really good when you have Secutor as well, because you can attack position monsters with Secutor, Wabaku, get 2 monsters out from your deck, and it's just a really, really solid place to be, because especially if, like, let's say your opponent has a big monster, right? And you go Test Tiger, special summon Secutor. So you spend 1 card, right? And you attack, and then you Wabaku, so that's 2 cards. But then you get 2 cards back. You get Murmillo plus any other dude, and then your Murmillo pops their guy, so it's +1. It's actually turns Test Tiger Glad Wabaku is a +1 into any big monster thanks to the power of Secutor. So really sweet stuff. Sideboard is pretty straightforward. I actually really like maining Compulsory in this deck. I think this is one of the best decks to utilize Compulsory, if not the best deck to utilize it. I've been practicing a lot with it lately. I do like triple Compulsory and Glads. But you're pretty tight on space here, so it's kind of hard to fit it in. You definitely want the call for game 1. I do like having them just in general. I think they're pretty good in the sideboard here as well. And if you're playing Waboku, it's like kind of hard to make space for a ton of -1s. It's kind of something that you would play in the Waboku slot, because obviously you get the idea. Like if your opponent has a big monster, you compulse it. You can still do the same thing with Test Tiger Secutor. And third Chariot, probably for fairies, that kind of stuff. Quick draw. Double Light Mirror for fairies, double Trap Hole for Blackwings. Really tight sideboard, really tight extra. Got the Stardust for his Starlight Roads. Got the Heraclinos, the Geyserus, and the triple Chimera Tech. I really do like having all 3 Chimera Tech. It does come up in this deck because you've got Call of the Haunted. So, yeah, really, really like this. Very tight list from Sean. Everything looks spot on. Pretty happy to see Glads do well, because it's been a little while since we've seen a sort of Prisma Test Tiger Glad deck do well in a bigger tournament like this. Next third place list is from Corey Fowler. This is more of a standard Blackwing list. He's got a really cool tech in Enemy Controller. This is such a fire tech. 3 Book of Moon, 1 Enemy Controller. Really makes it so you can push your Shuras through. He's got double value to make sure you can maximize off of resolving Shura. I actually really like Enemy Controller in the mirror match for a lot of reasons. You can like summon Blizzy, special summon a guy, Enemy Controller, sack the guy you got back, take their guy, synchro. You can do a lot of really cool shit with Enemy Controller in this deck. I really like this tech. Very, very cool tech. Also got the tech Compulsory. Really solid stuff. He is playing the double Royal Oppression in his main deck. I still think Blackwing should be on at least 1 Royal Oppression in the main deck. It is the best Royal Oppression deck, and that's part of the strength of the deck. Naturally, in the mirror match, it is not the best card to have, but it still has applications in the mirror match that I think should not be ignored. In the sideboard, he's got a Grand Mole, pretty cool. Rest of the stuff's pretty standard. Extra deck, finally someone who's got the Silver Wind, but he's got triple Armed Wing. I don't think you need triple Armed Wing. I think you can sacrifice one of those for another tech option, either a Android or something to those lines. Let's go ahead and get into the second place list, because this is where things get really interesting. This is second place from Ethan Guti. This is a fairy list, fairy control list, very similar to the one that I have played here on the channel. You'll notice a lot of techs that I have been practicing with. Cyber Valley Mind Control being the main one, the most recent addition to the deck. Thunder King as well. He's on 2 copies of Archlord Christia. Happy medium between the 3 that I think breaks quite a bit and the 1 that I play quite frequently. I think having 2 is good because you're going to see it consistently, but you're not going to brick on it that much. So solid choice. Down to 4 recruiters. I wonder why he was down to 4 recruiters. Might have been a card availability thing, not able to find a second Nova Summoner. It's kind of an annoying card to find. But it also might have just been like a personal preference. I think somewhere in the ballpark of 4 to 5 recruiters is optimal. 5 can sometimes be too much. 4 can sometimes be too few. But it's really just a player preference thing. DD Warrior Lady is absolutely insane. And one thing I forgot to mention is Ethan was actually undefeated in Swiss before going into top 8 and made it all the way to second place, which is pretty impressive. He was the highest seed going into top 8, which is awesome. If you were in a double elimination bracket, for example, he went the whole tournament X1, which is crazy. Like, that's really, really impressive. The sideboard's got some interesting ones. He's on Royal Decree Consecrated for the Blackwing matchup. A lot of Blackwing players, especially players in paper, have yet to adapt to Fairy decks going Consecrated Decree. It is pretty fucking crushing against that deck. And then, of course, he's got the Breaker to pop Light Mirror. He's got Triple Crow to help deal with Vayu to deflect deck devastation stuff. Nobleman of Crossout to help deal with Hamster, Raikou, that kind of shenanigans. That's actually pretty good against this deck. And then in the extra deck, he's got all of the synchros that you normally make. Avenging Knight, Ancient Sacred Wyvern. Very, very, very tight-looking list. One really interesting change he's made is he's cut Solemn Judgment. That's a cool cut. I think Solemn Judgment is very heavy on the life points, which can add up with crashing recruiters and needing to take damage for Gores and Trag. So I can see why he cut Solemn Judgment. Also, oftentimes against Blackwings, Solemn Judgment is just a trap hole that you have to pay 4,000 life points for, which is not very good. So in the matchup against Blackwings, I don't know. I don't know if you're supposed to side out Solemn, or if you're just not supposed to have it at all, or if you miss it when it's gone, or if you... I don't know. I don't know what the deal is with Solemn Judgment. It's one of those cards that's like obviously really insane when you're securing a winning position or making a comeback push, but at the same time, it is a double-edged sword. You have to pay a lot of life points, and that is a liability, especially against the hyper-aggressive nature of the format right now. He is on a main deck Card Trooper over the second Thunder King. I wonder why. I don't really fully understand this. Maybe it's just a way to poke at Raikos. Maybe it's just a way to run over Hamster and then not have to care about the Raiko that comes afterward. I could see it being something like that. I just generally, I don't really see like the utility of Card Trooper in a deck like this, but maybe I'm missing something. In any case, shout out to Ethan Guti for playing a deck that I absolutely love and probably skyrocketing the price of Christia even further. Super awesome. Congrats on your second place finish. And then first place, we got Vincent Casello. If I'm pronouncing your last names wrong, just tell me in the comments below. With Black Wings, there's one change here that I actually need to make. He has a Mind Control in the main deck, I believe. Let me just double check that. Yeah, he has a Mind Control over the third book. Yep, that was the one change I need to make. I imported these decks, but I manually did it, and I made one mistake. I remembered while I was pressing record that the first place list was main decking Mind Control, and yesterday I played against Jake, best Yu-Gi-Oh player NA, or it might not have been yesterday, it might have been the day before, but he destroyed me with Mind Control and Black Wings. He went double Whirlwind, normal summon Sirocco, Mind Control my Vayu, and I was just, or not my Vayu, Mind Control my Raiko, and I just fucking lost. It was the most crushing loss ever. He had like triple power spell, plus 2 of them being Whirlwind with a normal. So that was brutal. That was a brutal decision. He's also got the enemy controller tech. This is a really cool tech. I wonder if it's going to see more play. It put 2 decks into top 8, 2 Blackwing decks into top 8. I also think enemy controller is really good against the bad matchup of fairies because it'll allow you to just take their monster and synchro off with it. And it's a good way to like have an extra way to steal a Shining Angel or something that can be sticky or annoying in game 1. And what's really interesting about this list is he's got 1 Oppression, 1 Starlight Road, so kind of hedging his bets there. Obviously, once the Oppression is face up, the Starlight Road becomes a bad card. But before the Oppression is face up, Starlight Road is one of the best cards for this deck, I think, in general. I like the extra deck of this list best. I think this is the best extra deck out of any of the lists we've seen. I also do like the sideboard here. He's got double Soul Taker to help deal with fairies. Probably why he was able to take down Ethan in the finals. And he's got triple fucking deck Devastation Virus, which, again, probably why he was able to take down the fairy deck in the sort of finals or whatever the fuck I don't know what I'm talking about. I do think deck Devastation Virus is more of a blowout against fairies than Light Mirror. Light Mirror can be pretty good, but the issue is post-board, everyone's prepared for Dust Tornado. Deck Devastation Virus, you can prepare for it, and it'll still get you sometimes. So I think that's the strength of Deck Dev, and I think that's why he ended up on 3 copies of it for this weekend. Really, really good stuff. Congrats to Vincent on winning a PlayStation 5. That's super awesome. And again, shout out to Unmatched Gaming. Check them out on Facebook. Check them out if you're in the area. Show them some love. Show the store some support. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.